have to stop. You can keep dancing. We're here to celebrate our culture, our people, our blackness. I don't need you to be quiet. I'm so glad that I'm able to come back and moderate this discussion with such distinguished black women. Can I just say, black women are so dope. So dope, right? But I want to start with a couple of startling numbers. 43% of black workers are concentrated in 3 industries: healthcare, retail, and public administration. Those sectors are pretty much really all under pressure from automation, AI, and underinvestment. Meanwhile, black workers make up just 9% of all STEM professionals and only 6% of apprenticeships. So the question isn't whether the future of work is coming, it's whether we're being locked out and where we're being locked out. So this conversation is going to be grounded in power systems and talk about systems that have undervalued black labor while profiting from it. And we're going to talk about innovation and unions and real economic mobility. So the first question that I have, and I'm going to open it up to all of my panelists this morning, is what is AI not going to replace? I'm going to lean over right here.
So my answer is going to be a bit out of the box, but AI is not going to replace humanity. There will never be an instance where our humanity will be able to be replaced by automation, by a machine. And so I think in this discussion about AI and how we grab a hold to it and make sure technology and innovation works for us, we have to remember to center our humanity and to let the powers that be remember we are talking about people and we're talking about lives, which cannot ever be replaced.
Yeah. How many here have a little fear about the industry that you're in and whether you'll be replaced by AI? All right. You were going to say?
For me, I'm not fearing replacement of folks with AI. I think we're not thinking about the ways that AI is going to deepen inequality, because we only hear people talk about how amazing and wonderful it has been. And so with the first technological revolution, we didn't make sure that people who are at the bottom of the economic ladder had equal access. And we are poised to allow that to happen again, right? So folks who have access to AI are going to be able, access meaning that they use it at home. They learn how to use it in school. They're being trained on it. Those folks are going to have access to the best jobs, the jobs with the most potential. They're going to be the most stable. And those who aren't are going to continue to be at the bottom of the economic ladder. And so I think we have to think about how we engage with AI to make sure we're not replicating inequality that we saw, right? We didn't make sure that folks had access to cell phones and to the internet. And we saw how harmful that was to folks during COVID. And so a lot of the people that we're concerned about don't have access to this amazing technology that's going to transform work and education. And we need to make sure they get access to it. And then, of course, I'm concerned about the way that is going to deepen and kind of turbocharge inequality, right? Because we're going to say, this is AI. These are neutral systems that are making these decisions that are still resulting in racial inequality, but it's because we're introducing AI into unequal systems and not trying to correct for that.
So one of the things I think we have to ensure is that we aren't so afraid of AI that we don't engage at all. And if you think about the bill that was before the House and being signed into law, initially they were trying to push a 10-year moratorium on any rules to govern AI. And although that didn't go through, that is their aim, to actually come up with solutions that don't have to consider equity, that don't have to think about who's left out and who's a part of it. But to your specific question, building off of April's point, I always think of care jobs. And care is work that requires deep humanity and love and touch. And it is not going to be easily replaced by AI, but does stand to be made better by AI. You could possibly have better matches. You could possibly figure out how to ensure people are being paid fairly and not subject to wage theft. There's all sorts of opportunities if you start from the question of how do you make it more equitable rather than the question of how do you just make more profits no matter who is harmed.
April, let me ask you, because you're labor organizer and understand this power dynamic. Black workers, of course, are often most overrepresented in low wage jobs, but underrepresented in decision making. So, with that dynamic, how do we begin to flip that power through organizing?
Workers form unions. Workers form unions. Mm-hmm. When workers have a seat at the table, everyone does better. And so to the question you asked before in both Deborah and Fatima's answers, if we want to fix for income inequality, we want to fix for systemic and structural racism, we want to fix for systemic poverty, jobs that are today low wage, poverty wage jobs, when those workers come together to organize, we are able, like home care workers, like child care workers, we are able to build enough power to dismantle the systems that have been pitted against us since the beginnings of our time on this continent. And so when workers come together to build their power to organize, we have a seat at the table. We have real power to make real transformational change, to change today what's low-wage jobs into middle-class jobs. And so when the jobs that automation will replace go away, I got a cure. Make that home care worker job, which is the fastest growing job in our economy, a family-sustaining job. You build a new middle class, and you change the game for millions of Black families in this country.
I love it. Deborah, let me ask you, we're seeing many attacks on DEI, voting rights, anti-protest laws. What legal strategies must be in front to protect and center Black labor?
That is a complicated question, trying to bring together all those threads. But it's important that you are connecting them because they are all connected. They like to separate and say this is an attack on voting rights, and this is an attack on employment, and this is an attack on education. They are all a part of a unified effort to kind of the reascendancy of white supremacy. It is all connected, and we cannot be distracted and think that we should be fighting in one sphere. We have to fight in all of them. And there's certainly litigation options that are there for us. I think we need to focus on some underutilized civil rights tools that we have. But we also need to think outside of the box. Think outside of the civil rights box. And I love that April is here because so much of, and all that you've just said, we're not going to litigate our way out of this crisis. We have to build our way out of this crisis. And that involves building power in our communities. It also involves strengthening our communities. So many of the economic challenges that individuals face really find root in our communities where they live because of segregation. You cannot separate the opportunities that you have access to from the spaces and places that you have access to. And we have created a system where Black communities have been deprived of all the essential tools that they need to be happy, healthy, and live choice-filled lives. And that includes around the infrastructure of democracy, and includes around the infrastructure of economic opportunity and high-quality education. It includes little infrastructure because Black communities don't have access to transportation that is the foundation of a vibrant multiracial democracy. And so all this to say is we need to recognize the connectedness of all the challenges that you cite, fight them together in coalition, and use tools that may not seem, kind of the standard tools that we've used in the past.
That's all right. We're going to do it. Look, I want to drop in education just for a second because how do we also make sure that workforce development is in public education? When we go back and look how education was previously, that was also included in the curriculum. We're talking about people who, we didn't just build America, we build aqueducts, which means that we have a history of being builders. And so now how do we also make sure that we are innovators with our mind and competing more? And Fatima, I'll come to you for that.
Yeah, I start from the perspective of how does everyone have opportunities to those pathways in the first place? And we're in a position where there's a real contention over who is going to have a chance to jobs that really are high skill and high wage jobs that are out there. For Black women in particular, when we look at the wage gap, and I have to say Black Women's Equal Pay Day is coming up, it's July 10th.
We get 66 cents on the dollar.
Well, it's the day, just so I can explain it, it is the day that Black women have to work into this year to make the same wages as white men worked last year. So we are marking it in July. And many people think that that is just about pay discrimination, and that's a piece of it. But probably a much larger driver is where women work. It is the fact that they are overrepresented in the jobs that you name, the jobs that pay lower wages and sometimes have conditions where they can't thrive, but highly underrepresented in high skill, high wage jobs that are sort of the thrust of the infrastructure economy. And there are pathways to make a difference there. There are job training programs that can make a difference there. And we are in contention right now over who has access to those programs. That is a lot of what the back and forth with this administration has been about. That is a lot of what is happening at the local level in terms of which parts of cities get to be a part of these programs, which high schools get to have the investment to have them or not, which community colleges have those programs or not as well.
I was just going to say, something that you said reminded me of what's going on with the federal government right now as well. Yes, right, because Black women are disproportionately impacted by the layoffs and funding cuts in the federal government as our Black people writ large. And everyone knows someone who talks about a good government job. And there was a reason for that, right? These government jobs were well-paying. They offered potential for growth. They helped us get access to pensions and retirement and health care. There's a reason why there are suburbs, the most vibrant economically, socially, health-wise, Black suburbs are around DC because of these access to federal jobs. And now we're seeing all of those cut. And the impact on the Black community and Black women in particular really is not being spoken to in the way that it needs to, because it is not just does not mean just that folks have lost their jobs. We have lost a primary racial justice tool that has transformed the Black community, has given economic foundation and resources that we didn't have access to in the private sector.
And I was just going to say, and we documented that the DOGE cuts disproportionately hit Black women. So it wasn't an accident. They were strategic in where they were cutting, the agencies that they went after, the civil rights parts of the agencies were entirely gutted. And so we have an immediate problem around it, but this is going to have a tail effect for our communities for a very, very long time.
I feel that just as the same impact that we saw with the housing bust, that tore through Black families, that tore up a lot of the wealth that Black families were trying to build. So I think part of this is like, how do we pivot in this time? How do we pivot?
Yeah, so I'm going to always pivot to building power. I'm going to always pivot to collective power, to taking our agency, to coming together in organizations like unions or with the ACLU or with the National Women's Law Center, figuring out where you want to put your activism. But we got to get busy in ways that we choose. But we have to remember to hold accountable those who have caused the problem. And what Fatima and Deborah have been talking about, we went to good paying city and county and federal jobs because that's who would hire us. When the private sector, when the corporations wouldn't. We got to hold corporations responsible for what they have not done and what they need to do in the future. Those government jobs are not going to come back, right? We know that they are going to come back. But corporations have to be held responsible for hiring us and for paying us what we are worth. No one should go to work in this economy and not be able to work one job, own a home, take a vacation, retire, and send their kids to college, full stop. Full stop. It is time to say you are not going to continue to perpetuate economic exploitation and be poverty pushers, right? Corporations should no longer be paying poverty wage jobs to anybody.
So now I'm asking, look, that was good. That's my new speech. That's your new speech. You can always get this on the playback. Thank you for the words and the language. So now, how am I coming through the door? What am I saying to put that in action? What do we do to hold their feet to the fire? Some actionable steps, because this is good. This is me.
Yeah. And it's important. That's why we have to fight for protest rights, because they are silencing us. They are making it impossible for us to demand what we deserve to speak truth to power. So it's important that we protect access to protest rights, First Amendment rights, all the ways that we are able to do all the things that April is instructing us to do. From my perspective as a civil rights lawyer, I also think it's about building. We had an infrastructure of civil rights because we have known that laws alone were not enough to ensure that we had access to the justice that we deserved. And so there was this whole ecosystem of civil rights that was built up, and that's been torn down by this administration. It is not going to come back in the way that it has before, so we need to build something new. And it wasn't the infrastructure we deserved anyway. We deserve something more powerful to give us access to true justice, true equality, to protect our citizenship in the way that it should. So we have to get to building, right? The folks who have brought us to this moment, they have been plotting and scheming and planning for decades. Right? Some of you might have seen the movie Dune, probably most of you have not. But there's a line in there that they say, where they say, our plans are measured in centuries. We have to start to plan long term, to rebuild an infrastructure, to plant the seeds that we need that are going to allow us to fight for the real justice that we have still has been elusive. And so we need the tools that are going to help us to fight for what we really deserve.
And they put it in a book. And people still didn't believe it. I mean, they wrote it down.
They did.
They wrote the vision and made it plain.
They are following every single word they put down in that plan.
There is literally a Project 2025 tracker.
That's right. And it's what they're doing will feel to many as disorganized chaos. And the best response to disorganized chaos is organized resistance. So we all have to get organized and resist.
I love it. Y'all ready to organize and resist? Who's ready to resist? I need you to leave this. I know there's concerts and there's booths, but I need us to have that spirit of resistance that we saw with our ancestors, right? So, Fatima, talk about, in the few minutes that we have left, I want to talk about solutions and policies that have worked, right? What are some things that we need to be pushing for, or some things that have worked that you've seen?
Yeah, there's a lot that works. And I don't want to abandon, especially when it comes to our workplace, the infrastructure we have built over time, right? The idea that you have to pay people equally, that actually works, but the states around the country have also been passing pay transparency laws. And so now, both if you're in a union, but even if you are not in a union, in the states that have them, you know what your coworkers make. And that means that your boss can't pay you less without you knowing about it. It is changing the game in terms of the wage gap for Black people, just full stop, in those states. The second thing that I just have to say, when I think about Black women, about 60% are breadwinners for their families. They are both working, but they are also caring at the same time. We have an opportunity to actually drive policy that acknowledges both, that acknowledges what needs to change about our workplaces, but also what needs to change about your ability to care for your loved ones, because that's what Black women in this country are doing. They are working and caring. So that means things like paid leave. That means investments in our home care and child care workforce that's ensuring that people have paid sick days when they get sick. There are some basic humanity and dignity things that need to be built in both into our policies, but also in terms of our expectations for any company. And then the last thing that I would say is that, listen, we have seen people using their voices driving change directly with corporations in ways we have not seen in a generation. And that is going to have to be another tool we exercise.
Let me turn to you, April. How are you seeing younger Black workers showing up differently in this labor movement that you really haven't seen before? And what can legacy unions do to meet the demand around justice and flexibility and innovation?
Yeah, we just came off an event where we had 600 of our members travel here from all over the country to Louisiana, which has 8 ICE detention facilities here in the state of Louisiana. I think it is sick and twisted, but poetic that the same place where the blood of our ancestors make this soil red is the place where some of the worst atrocities by this administration are being played out. But we had so many young workers, so many young people drawing the connections between our history to our present so that they can build power for our future. 80% of young workers say they are interested in forming unions, but they don't want the unions that were our grandparents' unions. They want the unions that are about their agency, their power. So I like to say, I'm a labor leader that's building a younger, darker, hipper, fresher, swaggier, gym shoe wearing union, right? And young workers are excited. I usually have my J's on. I'm trying to be an adult.
That's all right.
Young workers are excited about that. Right, young workers are excited about how do I not have to go to the plant at 18 and stay there till I'm 65, but that my unions are building portable benefits where I can take my pension or my health insurance wherever I want to go work. Or I don't have to be a W-2 employee. I can be this gig worker and have a 1099 and work as many gigs as I want, but still have power in my organization. We got to build 21st and 22nd century organizations for the workers of the future that meets the economy of the future.
Put your hands together for that. You're getting the script today. You're getting the whole script. In the last seconds that we have, under a minute, I just want 10 seconds as we close to go down the line. Fatima, I'm going to start with you. Just so you will know and remember these women, Fatima Graves, President and CEO of National Women's Law Center. Just 10 seconds to give people just final words, just to leave with some empowerment.
My final word is our story isn't written. We will win again. And it will be in a way that is more beautiful and more powerful, but we must fight for it.
Deborah Archer, President of ACLU.
Yes, I would leave folks with a reminder that justice and equality are not self-executing. They exist and they live when we fight for them. And now is the time to fight. It is not a year from now. It is not a month from now. It is today. And so everyone needs to get up and figure out where you live, what tools you have, what skills you have. How can you lend them to the fight for justice?
And last but definitely not least, Miss April Vera, President of SEIU.
To the 92%, to the 80%, we have rested, we have rejuvenated. Now it is time for us to flex our power and our muscle in ways that we choose, with our joy and with our love at the center. But this is our country, and it is worth us fighting for.
Let's give all these women a round of applause. They are on the front line fighting day and night. I know they all keep their J's on at some point, but I want people to remember that Black labor has always been the blueprint. Always been the blueprint. And as we leave this stage, that the future of work doesn't have to necessarily happen to us, because it can also be built by us, because it has been before. Thank you, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this panel discussion, and go back and rewatch.